On June 22, 1994, in the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, a Colombian defender named Andrés Escobar slid to block a pass. The ball came off his outstretched leg and rolled past his own goalkeeper. He lay on the grass for several seconds with his face pressed into the turf. 10 days later, in a parking lot in Medellin, he was shot 6 times with a .38 caliber pistol. Witnesses said the gunman shouted the word "goal" with each shot. Once for every time the commentator had screamed it during the broadcast. He was 27 years old. This is a story about the World Cup, but it is not about the goals. It is about what some of those goals cost. And if you have ever wondered why football is sometimes called more than a game, what you are about to hear is the reason. Today we are walking through 6 moments in World Cup history that hurt to remember. We begin with the devastating story of Andrés Escobar. Stay with us as we break it all down. And don't forget to subscribe for more football stories. Andrés Escobar was a defender for Atlético Nacional in Medellin and a central figure in the Colombian national team. He was 27. He was a few months away from marrying his fiancée, a woman named Pamela. He was reportedly close to signing a contract with AC Milan. People called him El Caballero del Fútbol, the gentleman of football. The 1994 Colombian squad had beaten Argentina 5-0 in qualifying in Buenos Aires. Pelé himself had picked them as favourites for the tournament. They were carrying more than football. 6 months before the World Cup, the drug lord Pablo Escobar, no relation, had been killed by Colombian security forces, and Medellin had opened into a vacuum of warring cartels. The cartels owned the football clubs. They placed enormous bets on individual matches. They sent death threats to players who underperformed. Colombia lost their first game to Romania. Then came the United States in the second match. In the 35th minute, a low cross came in from the right. Andrés Escobar slid to block it. The ball deflected off his leg and into his own net. Colombia lost 2-1. Days later, they were eliminated. After the match, Andrés wrote a column for the newspaper El Tiempo. He asked Colombians to stay calm. He wrote, "Please, let's maintain respect." A big hug for everyone. The final line of his column was 4 words: "Life doesn't end here." 10 days after the own goal, he went out with friends to a nightclub in the El Poblado neighbourhood of Medellin. In the parking lot at 3 in the morning, he was confronted by a group that included 2 brothers, Pedro and Santiago Gallon Henao, who were notorious drug traffickers and had reportedly lost enormous sums of money betting on the Colombia match. The brothers' driver and bodyguard, Humberto Castro Muñoz, pulled out a pistol and shot Andrés 6 times. 120,000 people attended his funeral. Castro Muñoz was convicted and sentenced to 43 years. His sentence was later reduced, and he was released after roughly 11 years. The Gallon brothers were charged only with concealing the crime. In February 2026, Santiago Gallon was shot dead in Mexico. In 2002, the city of Medellin unveiled a statue of Escobar. Every year since, at every match the Colombian national team has played, somebody in the crowd holds up a photograph of his face. He was 27. The score was 1-1 in the second half of extra time. Michel Platini threaded a pass through the German defence. Patrick Battiston, who had come on as a substitute earlier in the second half, ran onto it. The German goalkeeper, Harald Schumacher, came charging out. Battiston got there first, flicked the ball past Schumacher, and watched it sail just wide. Then Schumacher hit him. Schumacher launched himself sideways and his hip connected directly with Battiston's face. Battiston fell to the ground unconscious. He had lost 2 teeth, suffered 3 cracked ribs, and damaged vertebrae in his neck. Michel Platini ran over, took Battiston's hand, and later said he was convinced he was holding the hand of a dead man. There was no pulse. The Frenchman's face was completely white. The referee, Charles Corver of the Netherlands, did not give a foul. Not a yellow card, not a red card. Goal kick. Restart play. When Schumacher was later told that Battiston had lost 2 teeth, he quipped that he would pay for the crowns. The match ended 3-3 after extra time. Germany won on penalties. Schumacher saved 2 of them. A French newspaper later ran a poll, asking people to name the most unpopular person in France. Schumacher came first. Adolf Hitler came second. For 4 years, no one beat them. Between May 1950 and the summer of 1954, Hungary's national football team played 32 matches and did not lose once. In 1953, they went to Wembley and beat England 6-3, ending a 90-year unbeaten record at home. 6 months later in Budapest, they did it again, 7-1. They called them the Aranyik Csapat, the Golden Team. The man who led them was a stocky, left-footed forward called Ferenc Puskás, considered the best footballer alive. They arrived at the 1954 World Cup as near certainties. In the group stage, they thrashed West Germany 8-3. The final was West Germany again. It was raining in Bern on the 4th of July, 1954. In the 6th minute, Puskás put Hungary 1-0 up. 2 minutes later, Zoltán Csibor made it 2-0. The match was 8 minutes old, and the trophy, as everyone watching had assumed for years, was about to be theirs. By the 18th minute, it was 2-2. By the 84th minute, it was 3-2 to West Germany. 3 minutes from the end, Puskás struck again. The crowd roared. The linesman raised his flag. Offside. Decades later, film analysts concluded he was probably onside. The goal did not count. The greatest team in football was the greatest team that never won a World Cup. That is the football part of the story. The rest is darker. 2 years later, in October 1956, the Hungarian people rose up against the Soviet-backed government. On November 4th, Soviet tanks rolled into Budapest. Around 2,500 Hungarians died. 200,000 fled abroad. Among the people abroad was Budapest Honvéd, the army club for which most of the mighty Magyars played. They had been touring Europe. They did not return. Some stayed in Vienna, some went to Spain, and some to South America. Several never set foot in Hungary again. Puskás was 29 years old, the captain of the greatest team his country had ever produced. He spent the next 2 years banned by FIFA from playing professional football anywhere in the world. In 1958, at 31, overweight and out of practice, he signed for Real Madrid. Over the next 8 years, he won 3 European Cups and scored 242 goals. He never played for Hungary again. He did not set foot in his own country until 1981. He did not move home until 1991, the year it stopped being a Soviet satellite. He died in Budapest in 2006. In his last years suffering from Alzheimer's, he would sometimes try to leave the hospital where he was being cared for. He would tell his wife the boys were waiting for him on the pitch. The greatest team in the world had 8 minutes of a World Cup final, and then the 20th century took the rest. Italy and Brazil. The 1994 World Cup final, the same tournament as Andrés Escobar, goalless after 120 minutes. The first World Cup final in history to be decided by a penalty shootout. Roberto Baggio was Italy's golden boy, the divine ponytail. He had dragged a mediocre Italian side through the tournament almost single-handedly, scoring goals against Nigeria, Spain and Bulgaria in successive knockout rounds, including a last-minute equaliser against Nigeria when Italy were a minute from going out. By the time of the final, his hamstring was held together by tape. Brazil were 3-2 up in the shootout. Italy had already missed 2 penalties. Baresi, Massaro, Baggio was the 5th. He had to score or Brazil would win the World Cup. He stepped up, he struck the ball, and he sent it sailing over the crossbar into the Pasadena sky. There is a photograph from that moment. Baggio standing with his head bowed, hands on his hips, staring at the penalty spot. The Brazilian players are sprinting past him in celebration in the background. He does not move, he does not look up, he does not look anywhere, he just stands there with his head down. He once said, "Of that miss, I had 1,000 opportunities to miss a penalty in my career. That was the one I really couldn't miss." Years later, when he was asked about it on Italian television, he said, "I still dream about it. If I could erase one moment from my career, it would be that one." He is in his 50s now. He still dreams about it. There is a Brazilian word for what we are about to discuss, maracanazo. It translates as the Maracana blow. Brazilians do not say it casually. The writer Nelson Rodrigues called it our Hiroshima. The 1950 World Cup final match. Brazil playing Uruguay at home in Rio de Janeiro in a stadium called the Maracanã that had been built specifically for this tournament. Nearly 200,000 people inside. Newspapers had already printed editions calling the Brazilians world champions. The players had been promised gold watches engraved with the words, "For the world champions," before kick-off. In the 79th minute, with Brazil leading 1-0 and needing only a draw to win the World Cup, a Uruguayan winger named Alcides Guidia broke down the right wing. He looked up. The Brazilian goalkeeper Moacir Barbosa expected him to cross. Barbosa shifted slightly to his right to anticipate the pass. Guidia did not cross. He shot. The ball went past Barbosa low and inside the near post. The Maracana went silent. Brazil lost 2-1. They lost the World Cup at home in their new cathedral, in front of nearly 200,000 of their own people. For 50 years, the Brazilian public blamed one man. Not the captain, not the manager, not the defender who had been beaten on the wing. They blamed Moacir Barbosa, the black goalkeeper. He was never picked for the national team again. People spat at him in the street. He was refused coaching jobs. In 1963, more than a decade after the match, Barbosa took possession of the original wooden goalposts from the Maracana. He took them home. He built a fire in his backyard. He invited the few friends who had stayed loyal to him for a barbecue, and he burned the goalposts. He later said it was the best steak he ever cooked. It did not free him. In a São Paulo supermarket in the 1990s, a woman saw him and turned to her young son. She said loudly enough for him to hear, "Look at him, that's the man who made all of Brazil cry." Towards the end of his life, he said this: "In Brazil, the maximum sentence is 30 years. I have been paying for this defeat for 50. He died in poverty in 2000. He was 79 years old. His position on the goal, repeated many times across many interviews, was always the same. I am not guilty. There were 11 of us. There is one detail from that day in 1950 that makes the Maracanazo even harder to bear. In a small Brazilian town called Bauru, a 9-year-old boy came home from playing in the street and found his father sitting next to an old radio, crying. The boy had never seen his father cry before. The father, a former professional footballer named Dondinho, could not speak. The boy walked up to him and made a promise. He said, "Don't cry, Dad. I will win the World Cup for you." 8 years later in Stockholm, that boy lifted the World Cup at 17. His name was Pelé. He scored 2 goals in the final. And when the final whistle blew, he collapsed onto his teammates' shoulders and wept. Because all he could think about, he later said, was his father crying next to the radio. The Maracanazo broke a country. But somewhere inside it, it also made the greatest Brazilian footballer who ever lived. So why do these stories matter? Why are we still talking about an own goal from 1994, a coma from 1982, a missing footballer from 1964? Because every single one of them is a reminder that the World Cup is not really about football. It is about what football carries. A Colombian defender carries a country at war. A French substitute carries the dreams of his teammates onto the end of a Platini pass. A Haitian student carries 500 to 1 odds and changes American sporting history. An Italian striker carries a wounded team to a final and is asked to score a penalty most men could not have stood up to take. A Brazilian goalkeeper carries the weight of nearly 200,000 people for 50 years and dies still trying to put it down. The men we watch on television are not just athletes. They are vessels. And every 4 years, the World Cup pours something into them that no human being is ever quite built to carry. Remember the line Andrés Escobar wrote 10 days before he died? Life doesn't end here. He meant his own life. He meant that he would recover from the own goal, that his career would continue, that his marriage was still ahead of him, that the World Cup was not the end of anything. He could not have known how wrong he was, but here is the part that matters. More than 30 years after he was shot in that parking lot in Medellin, every time the Colombian national team plays a match, somebody in the crowd holds up a photograph of his face. He is still there. He is on the statue in Medellin. He is on the wall at Atlético Nacional. He is in the foundation his father started for street children. He is in every Colombian who has ever pulled on a yellow shirt and walked out onto a pitch. So in a strange way, the last thing he ever wrote turned out to be right, just not in the way he meant it. Life doesn't end here.